Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello, I'm Sam Parrotto, and you are listening to Expedition Self. So welcome to today's show. I've had a couple of weeks break, and I spent it on this amazing, beautiful lake in Vermont. All I can say is like, wow, nature really does put a show on for us. Sometimes I think we don't even realize how it's designed, like how nature is designed to remind us that there's more to every moment, right? More to every experience than we can really possibly even realize, right? I think of it like if we can see it on the outside, like I can look at the lake and the mountains and the sky, then it must also be accessible on the inside too. So, that's what Expedition Self is actually all about, is helping you go inside the self. Because it's just so easy to cultivate and build and create with our hands, in tangible ways, and with our minds externally in the world, with other people, that, we forget that the original source of all of that is solely inside of us. So, when I see there was just I can't even tell you how many different kinds of trees there were that were like jutting up from the edge of the lake, all these different shades of green. This one was like a tree that goes straight up with straight line branches right across, right, extending out horizontally. And then another one has these leaves that wrap all the way around every single branch. So I think this same diversity is found inside of us. But we have a tendency to try to flatten and narrow it, like take away some of the shades of green or the different kinds of trees, metaphorically speaking, of course, because the mind doesn't really deal with diversity or confusion, or doesn't like to, at least, or not knowing. But, nature, as my point here, it provides that lesson over and over. So before we go on today, I do want to tell you, I seem to be having some Wi-Fi issues, so I'm hoping I don't. If that's the case, all of a sudden I could just be gone. I don't want you to think it's your computer or your radio. And I will try to make my way back. But I'm fingers crossed, we've got the glitch fixed at this point. So, going inside, it means you open to the idea that there's more than you know or can see or have seen. And you begin, when you take on this mind frame of how to do growth work, you begin to bring this not knowing to places within yourself that are about who you are, right? How you came to be who you are, so that you actually begin to question and explore and experiment with the hopes that you'll discover this new color or new aspects of who you are at play in your life. And this brings me to our show's topic today. Where are you on your journey? And I'm going to highlight some of the ways you can think about this question as a way to provide a sort of highway roadmap, one where you can spot some key influencers and possibly some overlooked signs that might cause you to feel a bit more aligned, right, within yourself. But before I go any further, I want to mention that this is a live call-in show, and I don't always get callers, but boy, I would like to. And although there's lots for me to share, if we don't get to it in one show because we have just so many callers, which I'd love, I'll just continue on and pick up the topic in our next show. So here's the number. It's 202-570-7057. And I just want you to know right now, I'm visualizing the phone ringing off the hook, right? Today's a great day for call-ins. So, okay, back to this big question about where are you on your journey? Well, the reason I wanted to cover this subject today is because I think when we don't take in the totality and purposefulness of our actual existence, it's so easy to miss out on some of the learning and even get a bit like wobbly around receiving what life is actually giving us, some of which we want and some of which we don't. I found this quote from the movie Casablanca when Ingrid Bergman, she's saying to her co-star Paul Heinrich, who played Rick, she says, I'm going to do it a little dramatically, but we live in an everyday world with everyday human beings, and we must start again faith and feeling to make the world's meaning in the foundry of our heart. I think that's so true. It's like, let's face it, life is hard and it's painful and we suffer and it's filled with other people's needs and their life experience and other events, tragic ones too, right? There's external influences from the structures, like the gathering of groups that exist outside of us. And all of this can look like it's not connected to who we are. It can look separate. And of course, when that happens, we stop wrapping the whole of it with the whole of us. And we miss oh so important tidbits that make our life more meaningful. So we're going to break this conversation down today into two parts. The first is going to have to do with how you look at your life to this moment. And the second will have to do with life learning themes and how you might connect more fully with your own. Okay, so to get us started, I'm going to prompt you to think about some moments of your own life, right? I think it helps to bring up your own personal experience because otherwise this stuff can stay kind of abstract. And this topic is actually kind of challenging, like to get your thoughts around. So feel free, grab a pencil and a paper and jot down like some keywords to help bring this stuff into your present. All right. So I think it'll help make the rest of the conversation more real for you. So, all right, here goes. Here's the first one. The one relationship in your life that has been the most difficult. The unexpected event that brought on a big change in your lifestyle. The situation or state of the world that has bothered you immensely. The kinds of movies that make you cry. The recurring, challenging circumstances you deal with all of the time that make you crazy. Your unique talent that's gotten you the furthest. Okay, I hope you got all those and you jotted down something to go with it because I think that gives us a good start. So in order to know where we are, we have to stop seeing how we've gotten here as having taken the wrong path, or that it shouldn't have happened, or if we only knew, we wouldn't have gone that way. You see, we human beings have a tendency to look at the past, to see through the rearview mirror and think it shouldn't have gone that way. And we do it a lot. We say things like, well, if someone had told me different, I would have made that choice. Or I did that because of my sense of responsibility. But if I didn't have it, if I didn't have to take care of everybody or do that thing that I promised I'd do, I wouldn't have done X. Right? Or life shouldn't be like this. It's just not fair. And if they would do what they were supposed to do, well, you probably get the point here, right? We're constantly living life and then having a reaction to the reaction that attempts to render it null and void. I'm going to say that again. We're constantly living life and then having a reaction to the reaction that attempts to render it null and void, right? Because of course we don't realize that it's taking something away from us each time this happens, because we're pulling pieces of wood one at a time out of the deck we're standing upon. You see, that reaction to the reaction is that we're having feelings, we're going through the life experience, and then when we react to it and think it shouldn't be this way or I don't want it to be this way, well, we're actually undermining ourselves because we stop seeing every step of the way as perfect and somehow purposeful in our journey because it feels bad or uncomfortable or disruptive. And And when we look back on it and can see more clearly all the pieces that were at play, it's so easy to assess and critique, right? What happened at that point. But when we do that, we completely diminish the beauty of the human experience, which is characterized by, I want to say this word because I'm going to say it a lot today, by all of this innocence and not knowing. See, in other words, we look back from a knowing place and rip away the not knowing part of it and leave ourselves feeling better in the head, but not necessarily in the heart. Because you see, the head places blame, it assigns responsibility, it decides what should be improved or changed, and it berates us for what we didn't know or didn't see, or the need we had at that time that was being worked out right through that experience. So, in essence, we rob ourselves of the human experience by fighting and resisting the living through life. So, that's why I say when we look at where we are, or where are we, it starts with bringing a very determined perspective to not unwind or deconstruct the choices and experiences you've already lived through. Even if you're somebody who says, I don't have any regrets, I've done my life, I really believe if you go down a few layers into your deeper consciousness, you'll see it's not really all that, right? Because it's just not easy to accept life for exactly as it is. Because anytime there's pain of any kind in our life, it brings up emotion. And when it brings up emotion that we don't like feeling, our mind steps in to try and erase it. So, to answer the question, where am I on my journey? It requires a very delicate attention to separating all of those difficult and painful emotions from the choices and events and circumstances you dealt with, so that you're less likely to make the most important pieces wrong. Sometimes I'll say it's like, things collapse in on themselves where you have an emotion and then the thoughts, and they all start like invalidating each other, but we want to pull them apart. That's that delicate attention. So think of it this way. As you look back on your life, what shouldn't have happened to you? What was brought on because others didn't handle something properly? How would life have been different if you had only known? What would you change if you could have? And this one's right, the classic. How do you blame yourself for making bad decisions or for others doing it? What seemed like it was out of your control and caused you to be disappointed? It's super, super hard to accept that life happens, that our life happens exactly the way it should, so that we can see things, so that we are thrust into things that produce learning, and that likely wouldn't have been seen in the same way if they hadn't have gone this way. That's a loaded sentence, but basically what I'm saying there is that you have to think about it from the vantage point of, would you understand life the way that you do had you not gone through that experience in exactly the way that you did? Even as I write this, and I was, making my notes here, my mind was like going over all of the moments that produced this like less than desirable outcome, thinking, yeah, but oh, it could have gone so much better. See, every painful moment of my life can be reconstructed now as I look at what could have been seen or done or said. But we have to resist doing this because it just doesn't provide the foundation we need to really see who we are and what we're bringing. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I cannot emphasize enough how significant this thinking piece is, right? So it doesn't have us face the places that we have shame or embarrassment or self-judgment, because we're actually in our heads doing something about it, right? So another reason why we want to accept it exactly as it is because it brings feelings and inner experiences exactly as they are. So I just want to give you a couple of highlights from my life that could easily look like they shouldn't have gone that way. So I got in trouble in high school at the end of my junior year, and I ended up leaving school for 6 weeks to attend another school in Oklahoma in an attempt to kind of get my head together. And my grade point average went from really high to very, very low because there wasn't enough time in the new school to do homework, and I lost so much opportunity to end high school, in a more advantageous position than where I did. My teacher at the time had a party, which I actually heard about from one of the students. And that party that they had to celebrate that I wasn't in school had 30 of my friends in it participating. So when I returned to attend my senior year, I got back and then school started again. On September 17th, I get in a car accident. And that had me find out that I had like a really severe curvature in my spine. And in those days, they did, surgery to straighten the spine. So I ended up in a body cast from October of that year. I was homeschooled and I didn't show my face on campus again until 2 days before I was supposed to graduate the next May. So I can remember walking off of campus before I went to have my surgery. It was completely vacant of people, like one of those apocalyptic moments, as if I was the only person left on the planet. No one to say goodbye or to notice that I was no longer there. It was as if I was a no one. So when we come back from break, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I would accept my life as happening exactly as it should.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
So you are listening to Expedition Self. I'm Sam Parrotto, and we are talking about where you are on your journey today. And this is a call-in show, so the number you can call in is 202-570-7057. Before we went on break, I was sharing a little bit about my own high school experience as a way to really talk about why you have to accept your life for exactly as it is. And what I was actually saying is there's a ton here I would undo, right? I would like to undo if I wanted to, right? My body didn't come through for me in terms of my body cast. Adults didn't understand what was happening to me on the inside of myself. My classmates didn't appear to care. Teenhood is so lonely anyway. I didn't understand what was happening to me because there was so much childhood, kind of like trauma stuff built up inside of who I was that brought me to that moment that I really couldn't think straight, let alone see straight, really. See, I'd have to take all of that and say, why was this perfect? What did it cause me to understand about myself? And why would these experiences be important to what I'm supposed to be learning about life and me and people and humanness? So I think if you're going to really look at where you are, you have to truly stand in the idea that everything you've lived through mattered, that it had meaning for you, that it shouldn't have been different. And it's telling you an amazing story of learning and living that's meant for you to decipher. It's hard to do this, though, because we have regrets. And regrets about causing pain for others, regrets about what we got left with that's made life more difficult, regrets about feeling embarrassed or ashamed of our behaviors. So if you're going to answer the question, where am I on my journey? Then you're also going to deal with those regrets coming up, asking you to re-experience them and find a way to transform how you relate to them. So I want to give you a couple of steps you can engage in to do this. So the first one, you probably won't be shocked if you've listened to some of my shows, but you just want to write your heart out. You want to write about your regrets until they don't hold any emotional charge and you begin to lessen the weight of the decisions. Right? You just want to write and write and write. And this idea of, oh, I've written enough or I've gotten enough. No, you write until you truly are done. Be willing to let the pain of it all out and do it until it's complete. Grieving your human experience for all that it wasn't is a big part of freeing yourself to move into the future. This is where you separate your emotional experience from your thoughts, because you do get to grieve all that it wasn't. You do get to feel sad about how it went. What we're talking about is then not saying it shouldn't have gone that way, and that's a mental thought. All right. Second, you want to try to connect all of the events into a story about what you actually learned and how you wouldn't have learned it without those experiences. And then you want to try to see the perfection in your human experience, including any pain or shame or discomfort. You make the story of being human your human story, one of winning and losing and drama and all that you've actually lived through, right? Because if you think about when you go to a movie and you watch that movie, you watch through the lens of taking it all in. But when we do that in our own lives, because there's this emotion attached to it, we have a tendency to kind of want to carve parts of the story out. So while you're doing that, where you're taking in your whole life, you give yourself the benefit, there's these words again, of being innocent and not knowing. This is one of the hardest things to acknowledge. I'll hear people all the time say, but I should have known, or I did know. But the truth about being human is that knowing in the mind, it doesn't really take into account or include all the other drivers that are motivating us at any given moment. So this is one of the most important things to see when looking at where we are. We need to see that we actually don't know what we think we know. At least not enough to have made a different choice. And I'm interested, does this connect for you? Can you think about moments in your life when you thought you knew what was going on, only to get to the other side and say, oh, if I had known, I wouldn't have. That's the place I'm talking about, right? Because if we did know what we think we knew, we would have actually made that different choice. Because that's where we have to start giving ourselves the benefit of the doubt of being innocent and not knowing. See, we think we know stuff, and then life happens. And then instead of going back over it and realizing we may have known a piece of it, but we didn't understand the full implications of it or the way it was going to play out, we regret it and then diminish what it actually took to get through it. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I really believe this is a core place that we relate with ourselves, and we miss it. We gloss over it. We don't realize exactly how much we're undoing what's going on inside of this idea that we should have known better, or that we think we knew, right? Because we like to know stuff, for sure, for sure. So what you'll see in this is you didn't really know. And that is the hardest thing to get about where you are. That you don't know, that you don't have control, that you are vulnerable, that you are helpless and powerless, and that this is what it means to be human. It's not all that it means to be human, thank goodness, but it is what it means to be human. So I'm saying that everything we experience in life is actually trying to teach us about what it really means to be human. Now, you probably have words for this in your own life, the way you describe it. But to me, when you really get clear and you say, well, where am I on my journey? Then what you're connecting that to is your understanding and your learning about what it really means to be human and what it means to be the human you are. Because if we can't accept that life is perfect and it's providing this learning for us, then we'll miss the true lessons about being human. We'll miss those specifics, and instead we'll get caught in the emotion and the feeling and the challenge of it all, rather than seeing that purposefulness. I hear a lot when people talk about living a life of purpose that they're really, they're meaning the intention, right? The way we make meaning. So that kind of purposefulness is seeing it as, I'm having trouble actually saying the word, there's too many P's in it, as purposeful, even when it's not clear that you had any intention whatsoever to cause it. And in fact, if you did intend it, you wouldn't have wanted what you got. Okay, I'm going to say that again because I want to make sure you're really clear about this. The kind of purposefulness that I'm talking about is seeing that there was a purpose to the learning or the experience, even when it's not clear you had any intention whatsoever to cause it. And that, in fact, even if you did intend it, you wouldn't have wanted what you got. So that what you're doing is you're reclaiming, you're recollecting parts of the story that is yours, and you're putting it back in the story. And you're making it purposeful so that it can actually inform the story in an entirely different way. It's like flipping the conversation and saying, this is what I've got. Now, what is it telling me? And being able to look for that through the lens of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be me as a human that you may not already know? So you can bring what I call a systemic perspective to it, that everything you live through is connected. You're not keeping some experiences and leaving others out. And when you look at the totality of each and every moment that you participated in, knowingly and unknowingly, something was happening for you. Something was coming together. And that learning about being is there for you to see if you look. So do you remember those list of questions I started you with, or the little points that I wanted you to put, keywords about? Those are the ones you're going to want to go back to now and think about what happens if you embrace everything that was going on inside of it, looking for what there was to learn about being human. So you see, my story is filled with this idea that my brain knew what was happening and that I was making choices from that. But in the end, I didn't have any relationship with my emotional experience. None. Not at all. So getting to high school and having things go belly up, it was hugely important because it revealed how much wasn't settled inside of me. And it humbled me, right? It had me not be able to just live in the world of ideas. And now some, pretty hefty shame and rejection came with it. But I was still able to recognize that I was walking around pretty unconscious to some things that were working beneath the surface. And once I went through those years in high school, I couldn't avoid what was there anymore, not completely. Did I know how to work with it or what to do with it? No, I didn't. And it didn't like turn around then. In fact, it got more intense, but that's a story for another day. So there were a ton more experiences that when you add them to that time in my life, though, I could say, I wish they didn't happen. But when looking at it through this systemic perfection for learning about being human, I can totally see how it all helped me understand my life and connect with these unconscious and unhealed places with myself and laid the groundwork for me to continue my study of being here as me. Now, I hope my story is helping you connect with yours. And I'd love to hear your story or your own place in life where you look back and say, oh, I wish it didn't go that way. And remember, you don't have to call with a question. You can actually just call and share a story or share a perspective or share something that's being triggered right now as we're talking. So this brings me to my next point, is that we are here to study life and being. And so I like to think about what these themes, these learning themes that we are like working with, what they're all about. All right, so I want to give you some examples of life themes. And when I give you the word, just think about all that would go into learning about that word. All right, ready? All right, justice. Justice. Okay, here's the next one. Empathy. All right, empathy. And then courage. Courage. Relationship. All right, here's the next one. Intimacy. And the next one would be building, making, doing. This is one of my personal favorites, self-responsibility. Beauty. Beauty. And self-expression. Right? Self-expression. Power. Power. And then thought and rationality. And here's a couple more. Body consciousness. And creativity. And my personal favorite is love. So as you thought about those words, I'm hoping that somebody showed up in your vision. It may not have been you. It might have been somebody else. Might be somebody you don't even know personally. Excuse me. But the idea is that you can actually look at someone and you can look at their life. You can look at your life and think, what are they really working on? Trying to. I can tell you, I've got a couple I've been working. Relationship, power, and self-expression. So what matters about thinking in these themes, right? What does it give you? Well, it makes all that life experience that you're having purposeful by thinking about it as a lifelong field of study. And because these learning paths aren't typically the subjects focused on, at least obviously in college, I think it's so helpful to begin to place all experience through this channel that asks, what am I really here to learn about? What does the sum total of each and every experience tell me that I am here to learn? So when we take the question, which is, where am I on my journey? Well, it starts with actually understanding, what is my journey about? That's what I really want for people to understand. Because when you can understand what your journey is about, there's something else that happens. You start to actually see other people through the same lens of they are on a journey too, and they have life themes they're working with, and you can begin to see why sometimes they don't actually work so well together. So if you take mine, relationship, power, and self-expression, well, you can't be in a study of these three without having to learn about consciousness, emotion, intimacy, empathy, right? Like all of those things would be part of that learning process. And probably I would end in some place around love. Like, what is love? So each and every moment of my life, the ones that I clearly see how I started and the ones that seem like they came towards me, right, that I didn't ask for, they now get to be processed through relationship, power, and self-expression, and how they interrelate and work together. Okay, so I'm hoping this is making some sense. We're talking about not rejecting any single moment of life as if it shouldn't happen, like totally taking it on as if it's perfect. We're talking about accepting our own innocence and not knowing as a way to connect with our human beingness. And now we're actually talking about how do all of the experiences of our life point to these life learning themes as a way to add purpose to all of those moments, whether we wanted them or whether we didn't. Okay, when we come back, we're going to go a little further. I'd love to hear some of your stories, so I look forward to hearing a call in.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Well, welcome back. I'm Sam Parrotto, and you are listening to Expedition Self. Today, we're talking about where you are on your journey. And this conversation journey, because when things were difficult and I wanted to really, what do I want to say, kind of exit whatever was going on, it helped me come back and say, no, wait a minute, how do I stay with this? How do I look? How do I understand it from a different vantage point? So I want to just come back to where I was, which is, I was talking about how each and every moment of my life came through this idea of these learning things of relationship, power, and expression. So I'm going to stop right here because we've got Cynthia from Colorado. Welcome. Tell me a little bit about where you are on your journey.
Hi, Sam.
Hi.
So I'm kind of living in the middle of one of those life moments. And I'm really interested in what you're talking about. When you look back on things, you can have an understanding that you can't have when you're in it. Mm-hmm. So I'm in it and I'm feeling it, and I'm really focusing, especially this year, on just gaining some emotional intelligence and feeling what I'm feeling and not trying to talk myself out of it. So that's where I'm at. And then I'm getting all of my tarot cards and my archetype cards. They're all signaling this is big stuff. It's time to change and let go. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? So then my mind is trying to figure out what's happening, what's the message, where am I at? What is the bigger thing? And then the other day I was like, I'm just exhausted and trying to figure that out. Just drop it. So I just wanted to bring up and see what you think about that tension between just feeling the experience and having the experience versus feeling and having the experience and trying to understand. And this is why I love what you say about innocence and not knowing, because that's kind of finally where I came to, like, you don't need to know, you just need to keep paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah, actually the experience you describe, I feel like I've lived a bunch of times in there where, I've done my, anything to help me understand where I'm at. And then I actually just have to live through it, because in some ways that is the learning, what you're describing, where you just allow what's happening, and the more you can stay present to it and the more you can notice what's going on and pay attention and feel it, that actually is the lesson in that moment.
That's what I thought. I think that's where it's at for me in terms of, what are the bigger themes of my life. It is being emotional, being emotionally embodied. I think when I try to construct meaning around it through my mind, I'm trying to eject out of the emotional experience.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, the way you're describing it makes sense. And the only thing I will tend to do in here sometimes in that nothing space, which is what I kind of describe this as, is I will look for other moments I have felt that way as a way to draw kind of a learning to myself. Because I feel like that helps me understand, like almost drop deeper into the experiential part of it, so that then it's like, burrowing a hole, going down 30 feet and then going over and then coming back up in the same hole that you were in, at another time 20 years ago.
I think I've heard you talk about this, where you go into those experiences and you're looking for that kind of emotional resonance or pattern that that indicates. So to the second part of what you were talking about, I think I missed it when you were saying the words. Those are, what are you calling those, themes or?
Life learning themes.
Okay, yeah. So that's where, when we're able to see those patterns, that's when we're able to kind of retroactively see those themes.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is that you are right, that right now you might not see that theme, and that connecting emotionally with other moments that were like this is really about connecting emotionally, not about the making sense of the theme yet.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't connect with it emotionally, then it's another version of popping out a bit.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Not easy.
Well, the thing that's hard is it's really lonely. There's no room for it in the world, the emotional experience. Everybody wants to talk about how much worse it could have been, or other people are suffering, and that comparing thing that we're told not to do, it's what everyone does. So I'm finding myself journaling and using my cards, which feel like they're kind of holding me and reflecting the bigger picture in a way that I'm not getting from other people. And I'm like, okay, that's lesson. Like, don't necessarily, like, what we would say growing up, like barking up the wrong tree. Like, there's only a certain number of people that I can talk about this with.
Well, yeah, because really what you're talking about is somebody else would have to be with that level of emotional experience to be able to be with yours.
Yeah, you're the only one practically.
Well,
which is why I'm listening to your show and calling in.
Oh, that's super sweet. I want to say, gosh, whatever you're going through, it sounds huge. So I appreciate you being willing in the middle of it all to call in and talk about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for being there. I'm really enjoying what you're saying, and especially the part about the themes and being able to look back and see those later. I don't need to think about that now. I really do love the innocence and not knowing, because that just feels like it's a tenderness to the heart to just be like, it's okay. You don't have to go anywhere with this. You can just be here and you're safe.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if we really actually came from that innocent and not knowing, how much room we would give ourselves to actually be related to us and really to everything. Like that, just the whole thing softens up.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling. I really appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being there. I'm going to keep listening.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. Have an awesome
Okay.
day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. So Cynthia brings up a really important point, which is that really the connection to the moment when you're in it is the most important thing. And if you can really give yourself over to it and not try to pop out, because what she described that other people are doing with her is what you do with yourself, right? So there's a lot of intention that comes into that moment. So, all right, well, I was kind of talking about my life themes and how they worked. And so I just wanted to go back to that a little bit. So, there I am in high school, and I'm way out there in terms of my self-expression. I talked a lot. I was always in the middle of something. I was being seen and active about, but what becomes really clear is that I don't have the relationships with my classmates and teachers that I thought I did. And I'm not really connected to them. And I don't have any understanding, like none, about my power or others' feelings at that point. But what the teacher did, it did feel like an abuse of power. And I didn't even have a sense of having a relationship with myself, right? Or I couldn't have called it that for sure. But when things went sideways, I was left with a shock to my sense of being in life. I couldn't stop that free fall because the part of me that was making decisions wasn't accessible. Again, no relationship there to access. And so the end of my high school days had me completely alone. Like no relationships outside of myself, no capacity to self-express at that point because I was in a body cast and I had lots of feelings about it and I was at home and out of my community. It was difficult, but the theme was clearly there. When we have a learning theme, the key is to interrelate them and think about how they work together. So one of the big equations I deal with is when I feel like I'm fully expressing my whole self, it overpowers people and then causes them to back away in relationship from me. So I have hundreds upon hundreds of individual moments where I watch this equation at play. Right? Working with a client, being a mom, hanging out with friends, cleaning my house, throwing a party, anywhere. That equation is at play. And through my learning, I keep developing more of a relationship with my whole self so that one part of me doesn't overpower other parts and they all get a voice in any moment. And when I do that, I'm able to bring that to external relationships too. So, when Cynthia, when you were sharing about what you're doing, you're saying my emotions now really matter. And I'm not going to let them get overpowered by my mind's attempt to get on with it, or go on with life. So you can hear the learning in that. So what goes on inside of me around my own learning theme is that equation of power, relationship, and self-expression. And then, of course, I'm able to bring that to the external world and make my life richer and fuller. See, this is the thing. Most of us see life outside of ourselves and then bring it in. But our learning and our evolution and our development is really the original source of all life experience. And then we collect the relevant stuff, right? The stuff that matters to that learning. We're thrust into a whole slew of circumstances that bump up against, activate, and they play with our learning theme. And the more conscious we can be about that learning theme, the more we're able to work with the challenges that come with it. So I guess what I'm saying is if we circle all the way around to the beginning, is that life is hard. And one of the ways you can make more sense of it and possibly even handle it when it's really difficult is with more consciousness to see each and every moment as an essential element of your growth and to zero in on your life learning theme. All right, so how do you do that? Well, you want to look at the list of questions I gave you in the beginning and look at the common themes or messages or experiences that bridge each of them. So you're connecting the significant moments, the losses, the challenges in relationship, right? The difficulties you face trying to make your life happen. And as you connect them all together, you want to think about what is the same in each and then boil it down, work to get to the essence. So let's think about someone who is born with asthma and they want to play sports, but the asthma gets in the way. And they experience this sense of being constrained or limited physically. And then they have a sibling who seems to win all of the awards for their sport activity. And maybe they even have a parent who is particularly athletic. So this person has a ton of musical talent, but is afraid to pursue it because they're shy and withheld. And then in grade school, the parents split up and they find themselves this person has to step up and start taking care of the family. So later, some years later, they have this opportunity to try out for the school play and actually take that risk. But they can't because they have to go to work after school. So instead of getting to finally go for something that would make them feel capable and expressed, the need to take care of others got in the way. So what is their life theme? How is it working here? Because you see, life has a way of stacking the deck. So we have to push through it to get what we're wanting. Because in the pushing, we have to work through our limitations. We have to find our voice or it won't happen. And sometimes life even uses resentment or a sense of being powerless or even fear as a way to stack that deck. This is what I mean about not making life wrong for what it is. So this person who can't go to the audition now has a level of feeling built up about what they missed out on. And they're now faced with choosing how the next step will go. So is their theme one of self-expression or self-responsibility or strength? This contemplation and integration of the three things helps to tell the story better. And again, what was the original way they came into life with lungs that didn't allow them to fit into the family, to get the good feels the way they wanted to? So they were put in a situation where it seemed like between the shyness and the circumstances, the thing they were good at wasn't possible to pursue. I hope this is making some sense. Okay, let's look at another scenario. I think we have time. So someone is born to a family that has few resources. They're super smart, personally resourceful, and realizing that if they don't do it for themselves, it's not going to get done. So they pick up jobs after school. They develop this entire strategy about how they're going to do the right thing. And in this process, they decide they want to fly planes in the military more than anything. But when they get to the point of making that happen, their eyesight isn't good enough to fly. It gets processed as another moment of they didn't have enough. See, the thing is, the life theme has to emerge through the life. There's something here about disappointment and maybe even about justice. You could pretty much have any of the themes I mentioned relate to a lifetime. What matters is that you explore what that means to you. Life learning themes give us a way to see the whole from the vantage point of it all being perfect. So there's an important point to make here, that whatever your life learning theme is, let's say it's strength, then you're going to have a ton of experiences of weakness. If your life learning is love, then you're going to be in a ton of moments when it appears love is missing. This is that invisible teacher working through our life. It's bringing us experiences that give us a full 360-degree view of the subject of being we're studying. So that's why, this is my final sentence, why we don't want to rule out the stuff we wish we didn't feel. Because it's really the only way to understand a subject from all angles, to really get deeply intimate with it and understand the nuances and those subtleties that go along with it. And this is what causes us to become wise. And yes, I think wisdom is one of the universal outcomes of our life learning themes. So, okay, I have a poem for us, and it was written, it's called A Poem for the End by Rabindranath Tagore. Let's see if I can get it done before I'm supposed to be over. The time that my journey takes is long, and the way of it long. I came out on the chariot of the first gleam of light and pursued my voyage through the wildernesses of worlds, leaving my track on many a star and planet. It is the most distant course that comes nearest to thyself. and that training is the most intricate, which leads to the utter simplicity of a tune. The traveler has to knock at every alien door to come to his own, and one has to wander through all the outer worlds to reach the innermost shrine at the end. My eyes strayed far and wide before I shut them and said, "Here art thou." The question and the cry, "Oh, where?" melt into tears of 1,000 streams and deluge the world with the flood of the assurance, "I am." Thank you so much for being on our show today, and particularly Cynthia for calling in. I hope that you are able to work a little bit with this idea of where you are in your life and on your journey. And I will look for you next week, Wednesday at 5 o'clock.